wanted to do a video really quick that talked about how do you prepare your preschool for emergencies or disasters or even illness. How do you prepare for that? In my past 11 years, I've had several experiences of having to try to prepare for all of those things. Let's first talk about emergencies. One of the best ways to make sure that you're prepared for emergencies is to be on your school's texting service. Now that basically means that anytime that there is an emergency or something going on where the school is going to go into lockdown or shut down or close early or not have school that day, they are going to text everyone in the school district. So even if you don't have a child in that public school, I still want you to get on that texting app because it'll immediately notify you if there is a school closure because of weather, if there is a lockdown because of either a drill or an actual emergency, or if there's any kind of inclement weather that may shut down the school or cause any other cause for concern. So that is one of the best ways that I can tell you to make sure that you are notified as fast as possible, because you're not always going to be checking the media, you're not always going to be on the internet, you're not always going to be checking your phone to know these things up to minute, right? But you do have a school district that does check those things. So literally having that app is a wonderful resource for you. I will give you an example of when we've had to use that. In our school, of course, anytime the public school closes for snow, we also close. And I do recommend that you follow the same procedures because you want to make sure that your own preschool families stay safe when they're driving as well. And you don't want them on the roads if they don't need to be. There's also been times when our public school has issued a lockdown because of dangerous situations outside of the school. For instance, one time a man walked into our local bank with a machete and tried to rob the bank. And as soon as he tried to escape, the cops were called, of course, and they were on this manhunt trying to find this man with a machete. Well, he was right down the road from a local school. And so, of course, the school immediately found out with all of their contacts and put the school and surrounding schools into lockdown. Now, had I not been part of that texting app, I would have no clue that there was a manhunt going on for anybody because I wasn't on my phone. I wasn't checking Facebook or the news to find these things out. So I immediately got that text that there was a manhunt and this was why. And so then I could put my own school and my schoolhouse into lockdown immediately by sending out a text message to my families and my teachers at the same time, letting them know that I'm aware of this situation, it's being taken care of, and everything is a-okay. And as soon as the lockdown is over, I would notify them again. And of course, they would have my phone if they ever needed to continue talking to me throughout the lockdown process. And so that is what I definitely recommend, is getting on the texting app, because you never know when one of these things will happen, but you will be the first to know. Another suggestion I have is to make sure that you go through your emergency preparedness plans with your teachers during the school year. So you don't just want to do a fire drill with just the teachers. You literally need to do fire drills with the teachers and the students, so they all know where the pickup point is, they all know where the exits are in the building, and they all know the procedures if there is a fire in the building, how to safely get out and what to do with rosters, who to call, and all those things. The procedures you want to make sure that your teachers know about as well as you have in place are fire drills, lockdowns, inclement weather, and sickness policies. Now, I left sickness policies to the very end because I wanted to make sure you realized that illness and sickness is all around us, and eventually it's going to hit your preschool. We want to make sure that you're as prepared as possible when that does happen. There's a couple times we've had in our preschool where we had to be really careful that the students who were coming into our preschool weren't sick and didn't have anything else going on. A couple of those times were lice, and I know it's going to make your head crawl, sorry to even say the word, but other school districts in the area were actually shutting down because of lice outbreaks. Now, for our schools, it's actually not something that they send kids home for, but because there were so many students, they had to literally shut down the school because it was such a nuisance. Now, you may have a different policy in your area where schools do send kids home if they find lice, but here in our district, it's literally called a nuisance, a public health nuisance, and they don't shut down school for it, except for, of course, when it becomes an outbreak. And there was the situation at one time when schools were shutting down. We had to make sure that everyone at our school was good to go because, of course, they had siblings inside of those elementary schools. Once we confirm that everyone is fine in the class, we move on with life just normal. But I do want to make sure that I always notify my parents if there's ever this big concern out there that they need to be checking their child before they ever send their kid to preschool. I will send out a mass text or a mass email, or especially getting on a Facebook Live. And if I needed to, of course, I could call them, but I do try to do mass text because that is the one way that most parents get all of the communication. Email is a little bit hit and miss. Phones usually take a long time to get through the entire roster, especially if you have 150 students. And so mass texting is one of my best ways that I do that. The best texting app that I can recommend to you is remind.com, REMIND.com. It is literally free. You can put all of your contact information in there for all of your students and teachers. And that way, literally at the click of a button, you can notify everyone inside of your entire school if there is any emergency or anything they need to know. And so I will send out that mass text about, hey, just so you know, there is an outbreak of lice at this other school, and it was an elementary school. I want to let you guys know that we will be checking students' hair when they arrive at school every day for the next, until further notice. And so please check your child's hair before you take them to school. In other words, if we call you, just be prepared to pick your child up because maybe you forgot to check your child's hair that day, right? And you don't want that embarrassment or that, inconvenience of having to come back from home to pick up your kid. Another time that we've had this situation is when there was a hand, foot, mouth case at our school. It's happened every year or so, but it's usually only one case or maybe two, but they are never connected. Hand, foot, mouth is one of those sicknesses that I just do not like. It is such a pervasive illness where it really affects everybody involved. Usually parents have to stay home from work because their kiddos have this hand, foot, mouth and they have to stay home with them. They can't do preschool, they can't go to school. Hand, foot, mouth usually takes about 2 weeks to fully resolve from the very first onset of symptoms until that last blister is gone, and sometimes even a little bit longer. Now remember that in your school, you set the requirements of what you want to do. So when you have a lice outbreak, and if your elementary school says, well, they can still go to school, it's just a nuisance, I'm sorry, but in my preschool, it is not allowed. Any lice or eggs is not allowed. And you set the policies for your school because it's your school. Same thing with hand, foot, mouth. If you went to a public school with hand, foot, mouth, you'd not be allowed to attend if you had a fever. However, once you had blisters that were scabbed, you could go to school. Not in my preschool. With children who had hand, foot, mouth, it was such a very contagious disease that I wanted to make sure no one else got it because it affected the home life so badly, and it was such a very hard sickness for the kids to go through. They would literally get blisters inside their mouth, on their tongue, hands and feet, sometimes just over different parts of their bodies, and it just hurt so bad. If you can imagine trying to eat with blisters in your mouth, it really was saddening to watch some of these kiddos go through it. And because I didn't want to spread that at all, I wanted to make sure that the students that had that sickness did not come back until all their blisters were gone. I mean gone. So it's not like a blister with a scab on it, it's literally no blister, period. And that usually took about 2 weeks, sometimes a little bit more. Now, I know that that's frustrating for parents to not be able to have their kid go to preschool even when technically the doctor gave them a note saying that they're not as contagious anymore, but nope. The rule falls back on you with your policies. So make sure you put those policies in your handbook about what you will allow and what you won't. Those are definitely things we have in our handbook. Things like no lice, nit, or eggs, and no hand, foot, mouth with blisters, right? No fever, vomiting, diarrhea within 24 hours. If you've been clear of that for 24 hours, then you can return. But do you see the hand, foot, mouth thing? That supersedes anything. So if you had a fever and you're like, but it's gone 24 hours later, and you're like, but I still got blisters, I'd say no, that hand, foot, mouth supersedes it all, you see? So that's how we make sure that we keep the illness out of our school as much as possible. Now, to prevent it and make sure that we get it out if it ever did come into the school, we definitely use a lot of bleach, and of course, check your health department for your bleach solutions so that you can make sure that you have the correct format. You don't want to have too much bleach in your solution. We also use Lysol disinfectant wipes. We also use hand sanitizer. We also use normal soap that we wash for 20 seconds with warm water. So hand washing is the #1 way to deter any kind of illness or sickness of spreading it. I definitely just make sure that you have your preschoolers, they wash hands when they walk in the door, they wash hands before they eat, they wash hands after the bathroom, they wash hands when they leave your preschool. Just try to contain any kind of sickness or illness as much as possible, and I think you'll be okay. Now, with all that being in mind, if sickness ever does come into your preschool, or if you ever have a student arrive at your preschool and needs to be sent home, have policies in your handbook for how you deal with that. So of course you can tell parents, don't bring your kiddo if they have fever, vomiting, or diarrhea in the last 24 hours. But what if a kiddo literally comes to your preschool and says, I threw up last night, right? Well, I would be immediately calling that parent saying, hey, would you tell me about what happened last night? Your kiddo says he threw up. Oh, he didn't throw up at all. Okay, thank you. Or yeah, he did, but you know what? I don't know. Maybe it's just something he ate, and then you feel his head and you're like, he's got a fever. Please pick up your kid. So you need to have policies. Usually you'll exclude the child from the group. You'll still keep the child within eyes sight, so that you can keep and monitor the child and have them rest in a quiet corner or something, but you do need to exclude the child from the group so they don't get the other children sick. And then of course that parent does need to come pick up the child ASAP. And of course during that period, help the child to become as comfortable as possible. And to wrap this all up, as far as preparedness goes, you want to make sure that you have enough supplies on hand if anything ever did happen. Let's say that your students for some crazy reason had to remain at school in lockdown for several hours, maybe even half a day or a full day. Are you prepared to be able to support them during that length of period? If you think about lockdown, guys, no one comes in and no one comes out, and you need to make sure that you are capable to help your children, your students, be able to have enough food and water during that time period that they're with you. Of course, they'll have plenty of activities, but you also need to think about the food and water on hand. Most likely your water will be just fine because you usually have water inside of your school or your home, but think about the food. You can only eat so many fruit snacks and goldfish for so long before saying, I want some real food. I was thinking about this as I was driving today, thinking of what kind of foods would make a good preparedness type of food, and I thought of Uncrustables. Now those are just PBJ, little circular things you stick in your freezer. They're basically PBJ sandwiches that are in a package that you can freeze and pull out at a moment's notice and be able to thaw those and be able to give them to your students. So that's one thing that you could do. Definitely think and make a plan of all the other kind of foods that you could have on hand just in case that kind of experience happened. I would definitely recommend having enough food for one day for the number of students in your school. If all you have is 12 students in one class, then that's all you would need. It's not like you're having more students come the next class because it would be a lockdown. So you would just want to make sure that whatever your max class size is at any given time, if you have 4 classes of 12 students each going on at one time in your school, make sure you have enough food for one day for 48 students. Do you see where I'm going with that? So just definitely have enough food and water. I also think it's important to just have some bottled water on hand. An adult needs 1 gallon of water per day. So consider that when you're thinking about your preschoolers. And lastly, be sure to stock up on hand sanitizer and Lysol wipes and all the different cleaning materials that you might need just in case of perhaps a coronavirus outbreak or other things would come into your area and those supplies wouldn't be readily accessible. You want to make sure that you have enough supplies on hand to help your own students as well. Hey, quick question. Are you ready to jump right in and get your preschool started? Oh my gosh, let's go. I would love to invite you to join our Preschool All-Stars. It's my exclusive membership community where you'll be surrounded by hundreds of preschool owners on the same journey as you, starting, running, and growing your preschools. Not to mention, I'm in there answering your questions and giving you support and cheerleading as well. It's the one place you want to be online. Now, also, when you join our Preschool All-Stars, you'll have access to our extensive library of done-for-you files, step-by-step videos, and all of my systems. That's right, you get access to those as a Preschool All-Star member. I can't wait for you to join us. Simply click the link in the description or go to preschoolallstars.com and we'll see you in there. Now, what are you waiting for? Let's go! Come join Preschool All-Stars today. And the last thing I'll say about this coronavirus is make sure that when you're talking to your preschool parents, you have a set policy in place. Get the information, get the facts, find out from the CDC what the symptoms are, find out what the incubation period is, find out everything you possibly can, and set a plan in place to prepare for that. When you've got your parents calling saying, hey, this happened, what about this? You'll know exactly because you'll be looking back at your plan and the whole policies and the system in place for it, and you'll be able to guide and lead your preschool parents with authority and with confidence, knowing that you're able to protect them as well as keep your school safe as well. As always, please comment, like, subscribe, and share so I can get more of these videos to you.